Hey, well, good morning. Welcome to Science Seminar that's brought to you by the Department of Chemistry and Physics here at LaTourneur University. Today, it's our pleasure to have with us Randy Compton from the English department here at LaTourneur University. Good to learn about Randy. I didn't know a whole lot about him before, but I do now. He gets his bachelor's degree at Covenant College, a degree in, what do you think? English, yeah, surprise, surprise. Then he went on to get a master's degree from Angola State University.
Angelo,
Sorry.
Angelo. Yeah.
Angela State University here in Texas.
In Texas, not
And
Africa.
Anyway, then he went on to the University of North Texas, and he got a PhD in, what do you think? No, wrong. American literature. Oh, yeah. Okay, yeah, got that now. And then he went on, in addition to that, he's got a Master of Divinity from the Reformed Theological Seminary. All right, that's good. Okay, we'll have to follow up more on that. And then he went on to do many different things, and he eventually landed as an assistant professor of English, I assume.
Yep.
At Lee University. And then from Lee University, he came here to LaTourneur University, where he's been here since 2007. It's 17 years.
Yeah, going on 18.
Already.
Going on 18.
Like you just came here last week.
Yeah, me too. Yeah.
Something. So after the seminar today, we're going to be having lunch with Dr. Compton in the Corner Cafe. We don't have the Joyce room today, so we'll be meeting up at that stage area. So if you want to join us for further conversations at lunch about science fiction or whatever, please do that. All right, and we'll give you now the time.
Oh, thank you. Well, thanks. It's a real pleasure and honor to be here. And you may be asking yourself, sort of like I'm asking myself, what is an English professor, humanities guy, talking at a science seminar? That's kind of strange. You've probably heard the old joke, but if you haven't heard it, it's a good one. Science can help you clone a dinosaur, and humanities will help you understand why that's a bad idea, right? If you haven't heard that, although I will say that makes humanities people sound kind of schoolmarmish, like we're correcting the science people. The science people are all the inventive, creative ones, and we're just sort of the brakes on them. So, but we're going to talk about a little bit about that today. So the question that we're going to look at today is, what is the connection between sort of the creativity, the search for the new, and the development of technology with easiness? And so the two science fiction stories I picked out today, hopefully you had a chance to read them. If you didn't, that's okay. I'll try to do the best I can with that, but have to do with the loss of human creativity that comes from making things easy. And so we want to kind of talk about that. What's the connection between developing technology and making things easy? And we're going to end with some questions. So be thinking about questions as we go through here, because there may be a sense in which easy is good, but there may be a sense in which easy bad. So we're kind of been looking at that. Well, let's talk a little bit about anxiety. It's interesting because one of the things that science fiction does well, much to the annoyance, published annoyance of scientists and technical people, is it raises public anxiety about technology. And it does this by creating story after story set in dystopian futures, right? There's some in the history of science fiction, some amount of utopianism, of course, but by and large, we have probably more dystopias than utopias. So if we think about utopias or science fiction as inspiration, asking the question, what if? What are some examples? You think of some examples of science fiction that asks sort of this question, what if, and sort of is inspirational science fiction stories you've read that suggest new technologies are going to help us? What do you think? Can you think of any examples of that off the top of your head? Probably the prime place this lives is Star Trek, right? Which comes to as close to utopian science fiction a lot of times as possible, right? The old Star Trek, right? Communicators, and now we've got cell phones. So there's a lot of predicting of things that might be, encouragement to move technology in a certain direction. But we've also, like I said, have anxiety. We have lots of science fiction that causes anxiety. It might be easier to come up with examples of this. Can you think of examples of anxiety-inducing science fiction? My generation, it was the Terminator movies, right? Yeah, the Hunger Games. Yeah, yeah, great. I mean, other. You can just start naming science fiction. What's that? Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's really old school, man. You're going way back. What's that? Oh, I know. That's Logan's Run. It's like, oh, I know, and you know, but does anyone else know? Oh yeah, The Matrix is a great one too. Yeah, I mean, it's just so much. This asks the what if in sort of a more ominous tone, not what if. It's what if, right? Oh yeah, that's great. That is a great example. Yeah, that's classic. Classic example of this. Well, it's interesting that we tend to think of science fiction as predictive, but famously, Ray Bradbury said, "I am a preventer of futures, not a predictor of them." Right? And what did Ray Bradbury write that probably a lot of you have read? That was, yeah, well, no, not Fahrenheit 451, right? Yeah. Which he wrote not as a, this is what's going to happen. He's like, can we stop this from happening? And so that was what he was about. Well, so this notion of anxiety, there's a Christopher Sims in his book, Tech Anxiety, Artificial Intelligence and Ontological Awakening in 4 Science Fiction Novels, said something that's worth thinking about as Christians, and I kind of want to just play with this just for a moment. He says, the paradoxical relationship we have to technology as a system of ever-present anxieties and hopes mirrors the relationship human subjects have to the non-human world while living in a relationship of dependence to it. To put this another way, perhaps humans are always in a state of anxiety when situated in a dependent relationship, and all technology anxiety amounts to a transference of the never-ending anxieties we have when dependent on anything or anyone. So interesting. What do you make of that? When you think about anxiety that we feel, we live in a very anxious age, right? Lots and lots of anxiety. Is that related in any way, shape, or form to use of technology? And so I want to sort of play with that idea a little bit. As Christians, perhaps we would say, well, you're on the wrong track here, because obviously we're meant to be dependent. We're created as dependent on community, dependent on God. We exist in a state of dependence. Surely that is not what leads to anxiety, right? But there's some interesting things we can do with this as we go along. I want to focus on one part of this. There's another sort of, I want to sort of play out another sort of piece of criticism of science fiction. This is from Stephen Cave and Compton in their essay, Hopes and Fears for Intelligent Machines in Fiction and Reality. This is homing in on AI. And they are noting 4 dichotomies in science fiction as well as in non-fictional works. They did this just giant survey of lots and lots of science fiction works, and then some other things that dealt with sort of issues alongside of that. And these dichotomies are interesting. They said what you see in science fiction, you tend to see immortality versus inhumanity. In other words, science fiction is searching, sort of probing for deathlessness. And at the same time, to become deathless is to become inhuman, right? And so these polarities in science fiction. Another one is gratification versus alienation. Technology has the ability to satisfy or gratify our desires, but it also has the ability to alienate us, to increase alienation. And also the notion of dominance. Technology helps us dominate our environment, but we're always afraid of technology. Terminator is a great example of this, coming back and getting us. And now AI is the new fear, right? If we don't take care of AI, AI is going to take care of us, and not in the way we'll like. That is one of the common fears. The polarity I actually want to think about today, that goes back to the title of this, is ease versus obsolescence. One of these polarities is technology. We seek out technology. Science fiction probes this notion of the use of technology to create a society of ease. But at the same time, the fear that lies on the other side of ease is what? Obsolescence. will we still actually be of any use to the universe, so to speak, right? We develop technology, the science fiction stories suggest, will we be necessary, right? Will we be obsolete, in other words? And so this is a way of sort of asking a question about that science fiction helps us ask about technology. If technology helps us have an easier life, is there any danger that poses as well? And so we kind of want to focus on this notion of ease. We could come up with other names for it. I did effortlessness just because I like that word. Ease. Other people have said frictionlessness. There's another word. You can kind of come up with your own sort of way. What are some technologies that we have right now that make life easier? We're surrounded by it, right? Yeah, I mean, your cell phone in your pocket, you carry a device that is, if you were a king living in ancient Egypt, you would not have the number of servants that you have in your pocket right now, right? Any king in the olden days would have loved to have had the servants you have. It's easy. Life has been made easier, we think, and yet, I bet none of us, if I asked you individually, if I said, do you have an easy life? You probably wouldn't say, why, yes, my life is so easy, it's awesome. Right? And so science fiction does a good job, and I brought in a couple of stories today that we want to talk about a little bit that suggest that maybe easiness endangers us in some way, especially in the area of creativity. And so I want to talk about this story, Pay for the Printer, by Philip K. Dick. How many of you actually got to read it so I can sort of get an idea? Okay, good. So if I ask questions, you can, the six of you who read it, that's great. You can answer those, right? So in this story, right, just to give you the sort of setup of this, you have a post-apocalyptic civilization on Earth. Everything has been destroyed in a nuclear holocaust, but lucky for human beings, aliens noticed the flashes on Earth that were created by the nuclear weapons, and they were so helpful. They came and said, oh, this ashy Earth, we're going to take care of you. We actually can make copies of things for you so that, we can start replacing your technology. And so these biltongs, the aliens are called biltongs, which is interesting. I won't go into that, but they begin to do what's called printing. Which, when I first read this story, led me to think about 3D printing. But interesting, you have the aliens that create a world in which everything is printed or copied. No one makes anything. No one builds anything anymore. It's all copies of things that people built in the past. Problem is, that's great. It rocks on for several hundred years. But the problem is, as you might expect, what do people do in response to having their every need taken care of? They have no ability to make things themselves. They've totally lost their ability to create anything themselves. And so one part of the story that's really important is this notion that civilization is cumulative. We're all sitting here today at our ease, right? Nice chairs that we didn't make, electricity that we didn't build the, stuff for. We sit on top of the hard work of many generations that came before us. And so if we lost this, the idea is, it's short of aliens coming in and, recreating it easily for us, we would have to recreate it ourselves from the ground up, everything. And so I wanted to just read a couple of things from this story. If you have your copy, you can look at this. But there's a critical moment in the story that after everything, the biltongs are dying, everything's going bad, and you have a character in the book who he and his friends have begun replacing civilization one little step at a time. And so part of this is horrifying, part of it's fun to sort of look at, because he brings this wooden cup out that he's handmade, and it shocks everybody that is not used to seeing creativity, right? And they're like, what? Where did that come from? Whoa, what's going on? And Dawes, who's the character who's been doing the building, is asked, how can you build a thing like this? We can't, he's talking about a lighter, you can't start out building complex stuff. You have to work your way up slowly, right? Slow is not easy, right? And I think that's is relevant to all of us because we all live in a culture where we want things to be easy for us, right? We're kind of like, oh, I don't want to take, you know, these bottom level classes. I want to get on to what I want to do, or whatever it is, learning a sport, learning music, whatever it is, you know, it's hard. It's difficult to do. And so this story sort of calls out this notion. And Dawes goes on to say, when the people are saying, well, a healthy Bilton could print this. And Dawes said, that's what held us back. In other words, when you have creativity supplied for you, it robs you of your own creativity. That's one of the underlying themes of this story is the loss of creativity. And later he's talking about this cup he's made. Someday it'll be that way again, but we're going up the right way, the hard way, step by step until we get back there. So this notion of effort, of taking small steps towards a goal, is essential to building civilization, to maintaining creativity in humanity. And so there's a lot of fun in this story about that, and we don't have time to unpack everything, but we do want to think about what this story suggests about loss of creativity, and what would we be if we're not creative. I'd be willing to bet that, I mean, maybe not 100% of you, but I'd say pushing 100% of you do love creative work of some kind, right? Because it's part of what makes us human. You find your own niche and you create, you build, you make, whatever it is, whether it's physical or music or writing or whatever it is that where your interest is. Your creativity is part of what makes you human. It's part of what makes you created in God's image. And so it's interesting to think about that, to critique that, and think, what could endanger my creativity? What are the things that could endanger my creativity? And there are lots of things, right? But we're just focusing on how technology could do that. And this is not anti-technology. I'm so glad and so grateful for the people, the long line of people who have come before us, who have made our lives, like I wouldn't have wanted to hook up a horse and buggy on the way to school today. Really glad that I could get in a heated car and drive here, right? So don't hear me slanging technology. That's not the point. The question is there some danger, something that we need to be asking ourselves when we make, develop, and use certain types of technology that could rob us of creativity, right? So that's one of the questions this story asks. The next story, really quickly here, feeling of power, which I enjoy very much because, and if you're a mathy person, you'll enjoy this, because this dystopia is set in a place where people have forgotten how to do math. They've built up civilization to the point where you have computers, and computers do all the math. They're in the middle of a big war. Computers are, helping them out in the war. They send missiles. They do all this great stuff. But no one knows even basic arithmetic until one of the characters discovers math again. and it's really funny because he's trying to show how he does this, and his name, by the way, for you math people, I wondered if anybody would catch this. I just barely did because it was in the back of my mind, like, oh, his name is A-U-B. Anybody want to take a shot at that? Thank you. Yes? You've learned well. So this story is interesting because the dystopia that we have here comes from a lack of knowing, right? Made easy by computers. But Asimov takes us in a different direction, and the thing that humans want to use their creativity for is ultimately destruction. They're like, imagine we don't have to build these huge missiles that have computers in them anymore. For half the price, we can make manned missiles. And so, in other words, and at one point in the story, it says, people aren't as valuable as computers, and therefore we can make these cheaper. We just stick a person in doing the calculations to, it'll get around the defenses. And so The irony here, of course, is the person who rediscovers or invents what's called graphitics in the story, Mr. Ayubi Alb, right? It's interesting in the story that they're in union, right? The union is between this notion, this feeling of power, of creativity, joined with something else, either destruction, depending on how you read the story. But this story also sort of posits a world in which we've lost our ability, we've lost some measure of creativity. Asimov does a good job reminding us that our creativity, that pure creativity is not necessarily going to be used for good, right? But that's part of this story that you have going on here. So just before I leave both these two stories, those of you who read it, what did you think about these? Did they, in terms of the notion of creativity and loss of creativity, and that playing a part in a dystopian world, what did you think about that? Is creativity linked to a world in which is a better world, worse world? What did you think about that as you were reading? Yeah.
So I've thought about before. Like say C.S. Lewis and people in that day were trained classically, so they would learn like Latin, Greek, and then they'd be reading all these great works in those original languages,
right?
And they'd be like doing all this stuff which basically no one can do. And there's a lot that's a long discussion. But then even just thinking about today, okay, well now we have AI, which will write your papers for you.
Yes.
It'll write your emails for you.
Yes.
And it's a lot of creativity.
So I'm really glad you said that, because that leads into the next thing I want to talk about. So yeah, so would y'all agree that there is a danger in our current culture of loss of creativity? Do you feel like there's anything we can do about it? Except have sessions like this and go, oh no, right? What do you think? Others that read the story? Yeah.
I didn't read it.
Oh, that's okay. No, go ahead. Feel free.
I think that some of these things are very subtle, because what AI can do a lot of the time is give you different options and allow you to choose between them. There's kind of this weird sort of gradual creativity.
Yes.
As opposed to, in your story, the paper, the printer, it's like either you make it or the printer makes it.
Right.
Right. But there's all these kind of gray things in between where you can slowly transition from one to the other. And that's maybe a little bit scary to me, because we may lose our creativity without even realizing that's what's happening. We're actually only choosing. We get into this mindset where, we're trained kind of by default to be consumers.
Yes. Yeah.
And so this is our default pattern. Oh, I'm provided with these different things, and I just choose from among those different things.
Right.
But we're not actually creating anything, even though we may be compiling different.
Yeah, it's really interesting, because when something comes up with choices for you, you're forced to choose from those options. You're not forced to create a new option or other options, right? And so, yeah, I think that's a great example of some sort of narrowing of the limits of creativity. I did. And in fact, the next thing I'm going to show you is like that. Like, so, yeah. Yeah, that would be awesome. I mean, I think that would be creative, right? I mean, but in order to create, you have to recognize a problem, right? You have to recognize a need, something that's going to fill that need. And so I think when we're thinking about building and making and working with technology, one of the things that we want to ask ourselves is, like, okay, if there is a danger, if there's a loss of creativity that is potentially here, what can I do about it? What is there? What field, can I do? So let me show you. I always lose things if I don't put them in the right place here. Oh, thanks. So let me read something to you. So I was pondering this, and so here's a third science fiction story. Bear with me. It's just the first chapter, but it's a work in progress, shall we say. So very short. So this is chapter 1 of a new novel called The Effortless Age. Okay, so Lena woke up to the soft chime of the ease system, a gentle melody designed to prevent stress. The walls of her pod home shifted to a sunrise hue, simulating morning, despite the fact that real weather had been deemed too unpredictable decades ago. She stretched, though there was no real tension in her muscles. There hadn't been for years. The ease system handled everything: temperature regulation, automatic muscle stimulation, even subconscious mood adjustments. Her auto nutrition dispenser had already prepared breakfast before she even thought about food. A plate slid out from the wall, a balanced meal scientifically perfected for her metabolic profile. The eggs were the exact right level of fluffy, the toast crisp without being abrasive. No meal ever tasted too bland or too overwhelming. Precision satisfaction guaranteed. She ate without much thought, scrolling through the daily guided thoughts feed on her wrist interface. News no longer existed, too distressing. Instead, the feed provided curated, uplifting reflections. Today's topic, the joy of unburdened living. Struggle was once the great burden of mankind, the feed reminded her in her pleasant, neutral tone. But thanks to the efficiency revolution, hardship has been eliminated. With ease, we thrive. Lena wasn't sure if she felt like she was thriving, but then she wasn't sure if she felt anything deeply anymore. Her schedule for the day loaded onto her interface suggested activities, mild cognitive stimulation, a set of gentle puzzles designed to avoid frustration, virtual leisure stimulation, historical experiences, today, the challenge of hiking, mandatory social engagement, AI-facilitated conversations to maintain interpersonal skills. It was the same as every day. She had once heard stories of a time before the ease system when people faced problems, real ones, before the automated solutions initiative. People worked for things, they made mistakes, they failed. The idea seemed absurd. Why would anyone want to struggle? And yet, something deep within her felt hollow. She shook off the thought. Thinking about struggle led to unease. Unease led to intervention. A soft chime interrupted her wandering mind. Her contentment score had dropped below the daily threshold. Within moments, the room's mood adjusters activated, subtly tweaking her serotonin levels. Warmth flooded her body. A voice in her wrist interface whispered, "Remember, happiness is effortless." Lena exhaled. The unease melted away. She smiled. Everything was fine, wasn't it? So, I say that, and I didn't write that, but what did I write before this came out? What I wrote in order to get that was, write ChatGPT, please write the first chapter of a dystopian novel about how society is too easy. So, in my area of creative writing, in literature, things like that, what I just did was pushed a button, an easy button, to say, give me a story. So, and by the way, I don't think it's a very good story, as stories go. It's amusing, it's interesting, but it's what it clearly is a mashup of a whole lot of other science fiction stories using a lot of terminology that's used in other science fiction, all crushed and mashed down into a little pellet for you, right? And it would be actually a really lousy first chapter of a novel, I think. But it's fun for the purposes that I put it to here to show you, well, what did I miss out on? Well, I missed out on a lot of hard work. I could have written the first chapter of a novel for this class, but did I have time? No, I didn't have time to do that. And besides, I wanted to make a point. So I wanted to use ChatGPT, take the easy way and make a point here. But for those of you who are writers, do you want shortcuts like this to produce your writing? What do you think? What's the? You can say, well, yeah, especially if I said, and there's money in it. You might say, yeah, but what might be lacking from this easy road? I'm speaking from my own point of view here, but what do you think? Those of you writers. Yeah. Yeah, I didn't express myself at all there, did I? All I did was I put a little prompt that said, here, give me this. It's like I would put a quarter into a Coke machine, or that dates me, doesn't it? $1.50 into $1.75. What are we up to now? On a Coke machine, and get a Coke. Thank you. All right. So nice, so easy, so wonderful. if we focus on the product, low quality aside, if we focus on the product of what we want, the thing that we need at the time, and we say that's creativity, that was a creation. Problem is you really miss out on what true creativity is. Creativity lies in the process, right? Agree or disagree? Like, I mean, it's obviously the process must lead somewhere and it ends in a product, but where does your creativity lie? It lies in the process, right? Of overcoming difficulty, answering questions, trying one thing, trying another thing. So if you write, one of the things that's very fun, and maybe this happens in development of technology too. I don't do that, so I don't know, but I'm assuming it does, where you're writing something and out of what you're making, out of countless rough drafts, countless attempts to say something else hatches, right? Something else comes out that's totally unexpected, that you could not have intended when you started out. The thing about the ChatGPT prompt is it captures my intent at that moment. It gives me exactly what I want at that moment, exactly what I want, within a range. But true discovery, true creativity lies in trying things that you don't work. Maybe it won't work. I'm going to try it and see what happens. Maybe you discover something else. Maybe something else happens. Like, wow. I think a lot of discovery is like that, right? Not just technological discovery, but books, poems, all sorts of things are like that. Yeah.
We are living a dystopia today.
Yeah. Yeah.
Especially places where the cost of living is outrageous. It's like a dystopia. But my advice is that buy an old house
Work on it.
that needs a lot of and you will see your creative juices just come out.
On the other hand, if you watch The Money Pit, you might not. I don't know. Right. I don't know. Yeah, I think so. I think one of the things is if you say, well, I don't know how to do that, right? Well, you find out, or that's what YouTube's for. That's a wonderful technology, right? Yeah. I don't know, other thoughts on dangers to creativity by taking and pushing the old easy button, other things like in other fields, other areas? Yeah.
If we make it that easy, then the value bar is going to go way down. Now anybody can do it. They have less value.
Yeah, I think that's really key, and I think there are other areas we could apply that in, right? Effort seems woven into creation, right? And I want to kind of think about that with some questions because I don't know how we're doing on time here. I think we got time. What questions should we be asking? I started out saying I'm not coming into slang technology. I'm not saying, oh, technology bad. We need to, live in a wilderness of, and build straw houses or anything like that. That's not what I'm saying. But as Christians specifically, what types of questions should we be asking about our, specifically this connection between technology and ease? I've come up with a few, and I want to hear some from you too. I'm not exhaustive here, but these are some of the questions that I thought about as I was working on this project. And so one of the ones that I've already raised, dangers of technologies of ease or effortlessness to human creativity. That's the big one that I've started with that I want to kind of play with. Another one is how can we differentiate? Is it even right? This may not even be the right way to ask the question, but can we differentiate between good easy and bad easy, right? Because we all know there's such a thing as good easy. And no one can dispute that. The whole, we do not want to go back to difficult plumbing, right? Or there's all sorts of areas that we are happy we live in a time such as this. Dystopian though it may be, we you know, if all of us were plunged back into the 13th century, we'd go, oh no, now this is a dystopia, maybe, right? In terms of we're used to air conditioning and plumbing and food, regular meals, right? So we know there is such a thing as good easy, if we want to use that sort of slang term. But what about bad easy? What might be some indicators for a sort of bad easy? It's if easy is bad.
Choices, then it's not really giving you more options, it's giving you fewer options. And that sometimes feels like a thing that's happening with technologies. They'll go through a cycle where at first they're new and exciting and they feel like options that you didn't have before. And then they move into a situation where everyone's just expected to have that technology. And if you don't, you're penalized severely. And if you don't do what the technology tells you, then you're out of luck and there's just no way for you to participate in some.
I think about that every time I log into a computer on campus, and if I don't have my phone with me, I'm out of luck. If I have to log in, if I have to do, verification, like years ago, this did not happen, and so I think that's well said in terms of, taking away choice is one of those things. I think about, like, someone referenced PowerPoint, like PowerPoint designer will design slides for you. And if you want to go really fast, you can just click the designer and go. But if you're like, I don't like these choices, where are they? You come to the end of the list at some point, you're like, these are all ugly. I want to make my own slides, right? And so at that point, PowerPoint, it gives you the power to do some things that you can use human creativity on, right? But if you let yourself, then you'll slide into using the same pictures that the program provides for you, right? That's keyed on certain words that in your slides or whatever. Other thoughts on that? Other ways that we might be able to differentiate between good and bad? And maybe, go ahead. Sorry. Yeah, go ahead, Aaron.
A couple of years ago, I was having a conversation with an AI software engineer. And he was trying to convince me. He was like, well, just teach the AI, teach ChatGPT to do your grading for you.
Yeah.
You don't have to do any work. And that was, in his mind, that was
good. Yeah.
And it seems like kind of bad easy is tied up with this, almost like a crisis of vocation, where, like, if it seems like if the easiness is getting in the way of what God is calling you to do in your vocation and that hard work, it seems like that's a problem.
Yeah, I think I would follow up with that saying, yes and amen. And then I would say also, can we work in this notion of leisure into that? That so often what easy offers us is a shortcut to leisure. Like, I got to get this over with so I can get back to having fun or doing what I really want to do, which is whatever. And so I think technology, or choosing technology in a way that cuts us off from labor, from process, and it makes us actually anxious to get back to leisure is maybe a tip off. Yeah. 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 Or trust in technology, which might even be worse. Yeah. We thank thee, O technology, for what you have provided this day. Yes. Yeah, good. Yeah, no, not
Leisure always good.
Right.
Always
Yeah.
the same thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Here at a university, or
It is. Yeah. Yeah. No, I think that's good. I think it's those are the kind of questions we need to tease out, because you're right. There's a sense in which leisure is also good, right? We're commanded to observe the Sabbath, for example. Like, it's embedded in creation. Resting is embedded. Leisure is good, but work is also fundamental, right? And so, but there's also, the connected to this, there's also the notion of toil, and so part of what technology can deliver us from is toil, right? In other words, working at something that is going to take a whole lot of pointless effort, right? In other words, it's sort of like the difference between a shovel and a machine that digs big holes for you, right? It's like, well, if the machine can dig big holes, I don't want to spend 3 hours here digging a hole myself, right? That's an easy analogy to understand. The problem is this distinction, we see it easily in that sort of physical work, but in other types of work, maybe you find treasure when you dig the hole. I don't know, it's like, oh, I never would have found this. So it's an interesting question. And I don't have the answer. I don't claim to know what the answer is. I'm just asking the questions to sort of see if we can think about this. What is there good and bad easy? Related to this is this notion of simplicity versus ease. What do you think about the connection between making something simple and making something easy? Is that,
To follow a good diet is very
Hmm.
just balanced.
it's not easy though. Yeah.
I know for me.
Who doesn't? Yeah. 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 But I think a lot of technology attempts to simplify our lives, but as you're already pointing out, sometimes it makes it more complex when we hit, the attempt to simplify. And I want to think about this in Christian terms as well. If we want to bring Christian language in here and think about this Christianly, is there anything we can say about this topic of ease from a Christian perspective? Just move it away from technology for a moment. Just think more philosophically and theologically about this. Does the Bible have anything to say about difficulty and ease in general? What comes to your mind when I ask that question? Yes. Right. Yeah, end of Ecclesiastes, right? Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. The Christian life, let's think about what it means to be a follower of Christ. Is it supposed to be easy? I mean, those of you who are living the Christian life, who are following Christ, know it's not easy, right? And I think there is difficulty that comes from the fall, that we are still suffering from the fall, but I think there's also difficulty built into the right way creation operates. I mean, I think we are made to overcome difficulty, right? I mean, that's part of who we are. And certainly that's been affected by the fall, so that we toil now, that work is often toil instead of pure work. And so I think we throw that into the mix of thinking about this subject, that a lot of what we kick against is toil, which is the result of the fall. But we don't ever want to get to the point where we hate work, right? Because we're made to work, and work is good and glorious. Overcoming difficulty is good and glorious, right? That we're made to do that. And so I think when we think about this in relation to technology, to sort of close the circle on this, is that a lot of times we look at technology that promises to overcome certain difficulties for us, and we need to ask the question, is this a difficulty that I need to use technology to overcome? Or is this something that I actually need to think through myself, to work through myself, to take a slow time here of processing, working, and getting something done? That is very countercultural, though, to ask those kind of questions. We live in a culture that is all about speed and ease, right? The speedy, easy way, because we've got other things to do. And in fact, once I get to that other thing, I'm hoping I can make that easy too, so I can get on to the next thing and make that easy too, right? And so that's no way to live, okay? The way our culture is living like that. And so part of being a Christian, I think, is being countercultural in all sorts of ways, asking questions, pausing, taking time to think through the significance of what you're doing, not just accepting and adopting blindly, I think is a part of that. Other questions or comments that we could add to this list? These are just ones that I was sort of ruminating on as I worked through this. But other things that, yeah.
I'm thinking that Jesus had an easy out. The devil
Didn't take it.
Hey, just bow down to me and I'll give you everything. You don't
Yep.
have to do any hard work.
Yep, the shortcut.
Yeah. But
Devil says, here's the easy button.
it's easy, but
Yeah.
so I think, the means of how we get somewhere.
It's just as important as the end, right? The process.
Well, I think it
Yeah.
defines what the ends are.
Yep. That's good. And also, yeah, other comments or questions along those lines? Yeah. Yeah.
Jesus are things that Jesus can have eventually. I mean,
Yeah.
he eventually is able to perform a miracle that produces food.
Yep.
He's able to ascend up into heaven.
Yep.
He's able to eventually become a king who has
Yeah.
authority.
Who's been given the nations, right?
All Satan offers
Yeah.
is you can do the same thing you're already planning to do. I'll make it happen faster and without all the difficulty.
Without having to die,
You don't
without
have
having to suffer. Yeah.
20,000
Yeah.
be-
Don't have to put up with stupid disciples. Yeah.
We have it right now.
Yeah.
Jesus knows what the plan is. He knows he's getting all those things eventually.
Yeah.
Yet the right plan is not the one that offers it quickly and easily.
And I think to follow up on that, the same is true for us, right? If we're followers of Jesus, what did Jesus mean when he said, pick up your cross and follow me? That's not saying, that's not Jesus saying, I'm the pioneer. I've done all the hard work. Here's the easy button. Just go have fun. It's like, nope. It's like, if you're following the master, you'll be like the master. I mean, your life will reflect that. So I don't know, other comments on that, just as we sort of bring that. Yeah. It's hard for me to see.
It's kind of a question of what's the important thing. Because like, okay, so in calculus class, if I need to do an integral, I don't just pull out my calculator to do the integral. I have to do it by hand because the important thing is learning the integral. In differential equations class, I'm trying to do the form of it, and so doing the integral by hand, I'm supposed to use my calculator so that I don't have to take 5 hours to do an integral by hand.
Right.
And can do
Yeah.
the important thing.
Yeah, I love that example, because what you're saying is a big way to answer this question is to use wisdom, right? Wisdom is involved. And I think as Christians, that's what we're urged to do, is learn wisdom, grow in wisdom. It would be easy to say technology that produces ease is always bad or it's always good. The difficulty is neither one of those is true, that the truth lies somewhere in understanding, as that example points out, sort of the wisdom of knowing how to do things, when to do things, right? Yeah, good. What else? Other comments, thoughts? I think we're almost out of time, actually. So good stopping point. Well, thank y'all so much. Read those stories.
Compton in the Corner Cafe. We'll try to meet in the stage area up on the platform. You can see us. Won't be in the Joyce Room. Next week, we don't have a science seminar, although the faculty be involved in their scholarship day. So sorry, we won't see you here next week, but do come back the week thereafter and something will be happening. I forget what. Let's thank Dr. Compton one more time.
Thank you.
It'll come down to the table here in a minute if you hang out.
Here you go. Looking for the button.